Good evening, everyone. My name is Walker. I'm a senior organizer on our national organizing team, and I'm speaking to you tonight from historic Tongva indigenous lands in what is now Los Angeles. For the last several years, I've worked on campaigns in Southern California to block permits for oil and gas fired power plants and to move our electricity grid to 100% clean energy, and to drive these issues into the ballot box so that we can elect leaders from our communities who understand the urgency of the climate crisis. Before we get started, though, I just want to give folks a quick orientation. If you are joining us on Zoom, we'll be sharing some slides and videos tonight, so please join from a computer or tablet if you're able, so that you can get the full experience. Just click the link in the email that we sent. We have some links that we'll be sharing with everyone during the presentation tonight. So we're going to turn the chat function off for the remainder of the call, just so that these links don't get lost. However, if you have a question at any point in the presentation, we do want to see it. You can click the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to as many of those as we can throughout the webinar. There were some questions submitted beforehand, so we'll try to incorporate and answer those too. And again, we are also on Food and Water Action's Facebook Live. So you can find us streaming live on Facebook right now. And if you're watching us there, hey. So yeah, let's get started. We're here tonight to discuss our national campaign to ban fracking and stop dangerous fossil fuel projects. Together, we've had some incredible victories against fracking at the local and regional level, but a patchwork of different policies won't truly solve the crisis we face. Ultimately, we're going to need comprehensive federal action. And now that there's an administration that seems willing to admit the severity of the crisis, and a Congress that theoretically should be able to pass the bills, 2021 is the year that we need to really ramp up our fight for comprehensive reform to our national energy system. At Food and Water Action, we sincerely believe that this is the moment where we need to make the difference. And I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge some of the tragic events of the past few days. Once again, police in America have killed a Black man during a traffic stop. Dante Wright was 20 years old. He was a father and a friend, and he should still be alive today. His death was not an accident. It was the direct result of a massive, long-standing systemic failure. And so tonight, as we talk more about our work to stop fracking and other fossil fuel projects, I really want us to keep in mind that this work is connected to the fight for racial justice. We've seen in the past few weeks, Asian Americans are continuing to face violence and hate across the country. Dante Wright was killed in the same state where George Floyd and Philando Castile were also murdered by police. And at the same time, in Minnesota, the police and state government are invading First Nations territory to build massive new oil pipelines. The history of racism and injustice in this country are married by economic circumstances. By that, I mean there is a class of wealthy people enacting racial and class divides to further their own economic gain. And we can't achieve climate justice without racial justice. So we will continue to speak out against white supremacy and racism in all of its forms. And we're going to continue to stand out in solidarity with our Black, Indigenous, Asian American, and Latinx neighbors on our campaigns and on theirs. Our hope at Food and Water Action is that after tonight, you will share not only in our sense of urgency that this unique moment presents, but that you'll also share in the action necessary to build that future for ourselves and for so many generations, hopefully to come. So thank you for being a part of this work. We're going to have some great speakers tonight, including our executive director and some of my colleagues on the national organizing team. And we're also joined by two awesome volunteers who are going to share more about their work so far this year and how they've helped us build this campaign from the ground up. So right now, I'd like to begin by handing it off to Food and Water Watch and Food and Water Action founder and executive director, Wenonah Hauter. Wenonah has 3 decades of experience campaigning and writing on food, water, energy, and environmental issues. She's trained and mentored hundreds of organizers and activists, and has worked at the local and national levels to develop policy and field strategies to secure real wins for communities and the environment. So I'm excited Thank you so much, Wenonah. Take it away.
Thanks, Walker. And it's so good to be here with all of you tonight. Like you, I felt a real wave of relief when Trump was defeated and Biden was sworn in as president. And on many levels, the contrast between the two administrations couldn't be greater. And Biden has been a pleasant surprise in some areas. The fact that he talks about the climate crisis as an existential threat is progress, and his clear desire to incorporate climate change into all levels of federal policy making is encouraging. So is the fact that he appointed Deb Haaland to be Interior Secretary. Not only is she the first Indigenous person to hold that position, she's a powerful advocate with a track record of opposing fracking and pipelines. However, at the same time, we know, and you know, and the science has told us that we're not going to be able to avoid runaway climate chaos without taking on the fossil fuel industry. And that means banning fracking, stopping new drilling. It means halting new dirty pipelines and power plants and compressor stations and export facilities. It means advancing a bold vision for 100% renewable energy that does not include fossil fuels. So while Biden has made some encouraging early moves, there are troubling warning signs that the administration does not plan on really taking on the fossil fuel industry in the way that is needed. Let me just mention a few of these. You'll remember that President Biden ran for office pledging to stop new drilling on federal lands. Well, he hasn't fulfilled that promise. He instituted an initial period of heightened review for drilling permits, but it's been allowed to lapse. And permits for new drilling are being approved at an increasing rate. He made Gina McCarthy climate point person, and you'll remember that she ran interference for the fracking industry when she headed up the EPA under President Obama. She recently held a disturbing meeting with oil and gas interests where she made it perfectly clear that the administration was not, quote, fighting the oil and gas sector and pledged to work on shared priorities. Well, Deb Haaland was appointed as Interior Secretary. Team Biden shelved the nomination of Liz Klein as her Deputy Secretary because of concerns that she would be too hard on the fossil fuel industry. Klein is a real progressive who also had been in the Obama administration. Also, international climate envoy John Kerry has been talking with Wall Street. He's been evangelizing about the markets and saying that the private sector, rather than the government, is going to solve the problem. And finally, the Biden climate plan includes subsidies for dirty energy, including funding for so-called carbon capture, which is backed and promoted by the oil and gas industry, and will just encourage more fracking and increased exports of fracked gas. His plan also includes more money for dirty and dangerous nuclear power. We're at a crossroads, and with the Biden administration, there are both challenges and opportunities. For the first time in recent memory, we have a president talking about addressing climate change as a top priority. And with the urgency of the crisis, this effort can't come soon enough. But at the same time, the crisis won't be addressed if the administration keeps trying to placate the oil and gas industry and doesn't think big enough to meet the scale of the problem. That's why I am so heartened to see you on this webinar tonight. We know that with a good strategy and enough people and resources, we can win, even against powerful forces. Together, we banned fracking and stopped drilling in places like New York, Maryland, and dozens of communities across the country. We can win. It requires organizing and demanding what is needed, not just what people say is politically expedient. In this moment, we need to organize, 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 and work together like never before. We need to engage new allies and bring new and diverse constituencies into the movement. It's going to take every single one of us to recruit more people in every community of this country and to bring the change we really need to address the climate emergency. So thank you for being on this call. Thank you for being involved. Together, working at the local, state, and national level, we can build the political power necessary to push the administration to be bolder and to take on the dirty energy industries that are poisoning our planet. We don't have any other choice. Onward together.
Thank you, Wenonah. Inspiring as always. I don't think there's anyone who cuts the issues better than you do. Now I'd like to introduce the organizing director of our national organizing program, Emily Wurth. Emily manages our team of organizers working across the country on our campaigns to stop climate change, ban factory farms, and ensure safe, affordable water for all. So take it away, Emily.
Thank you, Walker, and thank you all so much for joining. It's really wonderful to be with you tonight. As Walker said, I'm the organizing director, and I feel really lucky to have been involved in the campaigns against fracking and the build out of all the associated fossil fuel infrastructure for more than a decade now. I still remember the day that we decided at Food and Water Watch to come out for a national ban on fracking. We were the first national organization to do that, and I can't believe that was 10 years ago last month. We knew at that time there was simply no safe way to frack based on what we looked at, and everything we've seen since then has just provided further evidence of that decision. I was also really lucky to be deeply engaged with many of the people that I see are actually on this call tonight in the work in coalition to ban fracking in both New York and Maryland. And in those campaigns, we worked, like I said, with allies and coalition to organize thousands of people and to really build the political power that was needed to move state level officials to ban fracking. And that was Governor Cuomo in New York, or key members of the state legislature in Maryland, and ultimately the Republican Governor Hogan. And we heard from them many of the same things we're hearing from the Biden administration. And so that's just interesting to look back on. And so both of those campaigns required really strategic planning to figure out how could we most effectively put pressure on these elected officials and move them to the position we wanted for supporting a ban on fracking. It took so many people, again, many of whom are here, taking actions to get people engaged, to bring in a wide diversity of constituencies concerned about the issue, from public health professionals who could really point to the science of fracking and the potential harms, to local elected officials who were working at the local level, faith communities, the local tourism industries in many of the communities that would be impacted. We even had wineries and breweries get involved. And it really took organizing ongoing activities to bring a large number of people into the campaign. And so many people were doing things to help gather petitions and bring new people in, to educate people in their communities about the issues. We would hold rallies, marches, call-in days. We would track down elected officials and find out where they were going to be at public events and hold up signs to bring attention to our issue. We worked to pass resolutions and bans at the local level and actually organized local elected official sign-on letters, much like the one you're going to be hearing a lot more about tonight. And really too many other tactics to name. But all of these together built the power of the movement, generated tons of media and brought attention to the issue and helped to shift public opinion against fracking, not only in these key states, but also nationally. Now, a lot of us who've been doing this work know it's easier to stop something before it started. And that's what happened in states like New York, Maryland, as well as other states, Vermont, Washington State, Oregon has passed a 5-year moratorium where fracking was never allowed in the first place. But we've also had success and made progress working with our allies and many of the frontline communities to push back against the fossil fuel industry in states where it's much more deeply entrenched, like Pennsylvania, Colorado, New Mexico, and California. We've worked together with people in these communities, passed local bans and ordinance, both at the ballot and through local councils. We've used zoning ordinances to zone fracking out of most land uses. And we have a really exciting project in Allegheny County in Western Pennsylvania doing that right now. In Colorado, we made so much progress passing these local measures. The industry worked with legislators in the courts to try to overturn them and preempt these local fracking bans. And we know that's going to happen when we take on the most powerful industries out there, like the fossil fuel industry. They're always going to be fighting back against whatever progress that we make. And that's why it's so essential for public interest organizations like Food and Water Watch and our allies and many of the committed activists on this call to be there for the long haul, so that we are there not only to win these victories, but also to defend them when we know the industry is going to come back and try to take them away. So I want to take a moment to highlight a recent victory that's actually been more than a decade in the making. And I'm sure many of you on this call played a role in making this happen. In February of this year, fracking was permanently banned in the Delaware River Basin. And this river basin, for those who might not be familiar, provides drinking water for more than 15 million people. It underlies 4 key states in the Northeast: Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And there's a commission called the Delaware River Basin Commission that's comprised of the governors of each of those states. And the US president essentially has an Army Corps of Engineer representative. So 4 governors and presidents are the ultimate decision makers. And back in 2010, this commission had drafted regulations that was going to allow fracking to move forward in this river basin. And through a tremendous coalition organizing campaign that included a wide variety of tactics, we were able to put enough pressure on 2 governors, Governor Cuomo of New York, and ultimately the deciding factor, Governor Markell of Delaware, to convince them not to vote for these regulations. And at the time, Obama was the president, and he did not want to be the deciding vote because Governor Christie was the governor in New Jersey and Governor Corbett was the governor in Pennsylvania, and they were both in favor of allowing fracking. And so the meeting that had been scheduled where this vote was going to take place was just canceled. And there was an indefinite moratorium on fracking that was in place basically up until 2017. It was indefinite, and they just never revisited the issue. And this was actually one of the first major wins of the anti-fracking movement. But in 2017, the commission introduced regulations to permanently ban fracking in the river basin. But unfortunately, they allowed for the withdrawal of water from the river basin and the transport and treatment of the fracking waste at the same time that they were going to frack it. They banned fracking. So we pushed hard and said, look, we want to ban on fracking, but we don't want to allow fracking wastewater to be treated in the river basin or fresh water to be withdrawn. And we were just relentless in pushing for that. And so just last month, as the politics have shifted at the national level and at the state level, the commission voted to ban fracking and committed to starting a new process to look at the fracking waste and water withdrawals that we'll continue to diligently stay on top of and find ways to engage so that we ensure that that is also banned in the river basin. So we created a short video that I think we're going to share now about this campaign.
hard work you all and we all put in to organizing against this paid off, and this movement is working.
So as you can see, President Biden abstained in that vote, claiming it was too early into his administration. So we know we have our work cut out, but it was really exciting or really interesting to see that Governor Wolf voted for that, because he's not been willing to take on the industry in other parts of the state. So I know many of our allies in Pennsylvania are using that to push him to be better on the issue now. So we've won at the local, state, and regional level, and we're still doing that, but both because of the urgency we face right now in addressing climate change, and because we've really built power across the country together through the work that many of you have done, and the substantial victories that we've won together. Now is the time that we can leverage that power to push President Biden to use his executive authority to stop fracking on public lands, as he committed, to stop approving new fossil fuel projects like Line 3 and DAPL and others that I've seen mentioned, and to ultimately support a ban on fracking. And we need to also push Congress to pass the kind of comprehensive legislation that's needed to address climate change in a way that actually takes on the fossil fuel industry most responsible for causing the problems that we're facing. Now, I know there are some people that might look at some of the current political situation, what we've seen thus far from Biden, who doesn't appear to want to directly take on the fossil fuel industry, and a Congress where people like Joe Manchin hold tremendous political power, and people might say this fight's impossible. But I just remember people saying the same thing to us about our fight to ban fracking in New York, about our work to pass both a moratorium and a ban on fracking in Maryland, and for the Delaware River Basin. And so I know that we can win this campaign, and we must win it, because everything we hold dear is on the line. Together, we can confront this current political reality, and we can change it. Politics is not set in stone. If nothing else, what we've seen and shown over the years is that supposedly unwinnable campaigns are winnable if we work strategically, organize together, and when we believe it's possible. So I want to thank everyone so much for everything that you're doing, and I'll turn it back over to Walker.
Thank you so much, Emily. If Emily or Wenonah's words brought up any questions for you, you can always click the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to as many of those as we can throughout and at the end of the webinar. And before we get to our next speakers, I wanted to share 2 ways that you can get involved and support this work. First, you can support the campaign with a monthly donation to Food and Water Action. We know that this is still a difficult time for a lot of folks and their families, but if you are able, a small monthly donation is one of the best ways to support this urgent work to build support for a national ban on fracking. In honor of Earth Day next week, Food and Water Action has a small group of supporters who are matching all new monthly donations from this call through the end of the year. So your monthly support, along with the generosity of all of our action partners, allows us to build the political power that we need to take on the fossil fuel industry. And if you look at the chat, the link to sign up is right there. You can also support this crucial campaign by volunteering and delivering a letter from local elected officials, or to a local elected officials. Sorry, I'm getting mixed up. From local elected officials to your representatives in Congress. Sign up at the link in the chat and we'll send you everything you need. And I'll share more about volunteering and supporting this campaign later in the call. But now I would like to introduce my brilliant colleague and regional organizer, Zhenya Polosova, who works on our campaigns in the Midwest.
Thanks so much for the intro, Walker. Hey, everyone. My name is Zhenya. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm based in Chicago, which is located on Indigenous Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi land. As Walker mentioned, I work in the Midwest to stop fossil fuel extraction and water privatization, and I'm also a part of our national climate team. In these next few minutes, I'm going to hone in on the history of the work that we've done on the national level to push forth the campaign demands of moving our country off fossil fuels and towards a just transition to renewable energy. As Emily shared, Food and Water Watch has been working to ban fracking since 2010 and has had many victories at the local and state level. But we know that the urgency of climate change calls for drastic action, so we're focusing more of our work on the federal level to build support for a ban on fracking everywhere in the United States and thus move faster towards the clean energy future we need. So in 2017, we worked with our allies in the House of Representatives to draft and introduce the Off Fossil Fuels for a Better Future Act. And this bill required a transition to 100% renewable energy by 2035 and would stop federal permits for oil and gas exports and other fossil fuel projects. It would also end fossil fuel subsidies, establish a rebate program for electric vehicles, weatherize homes in low-income communities at no cost, and so much more. And we ultimately recruited over 500 organizations to endorse this bill and added 46 co-sponsors in the US House. And it was a similar story with another piece of federal legislation that we helped introduce last year. The Fracking Ban Act was introduced in February 2020 by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and this time it was also introduced in the Senate by Bernie Sanders. The Fracking Ban Act would have prohibited federal agencies from issuing permits for new fracking or fracking infrastructure. It would have revoked permits for fracking wells within 2,500 feet of homes, hospitals, and schools. It would have established a Just Transition Committee in the Department of Labor and banned fracking nationwide by January 2025. And despite all the challenges that we faced in 2020, we recruited over 650 organizations to endorse the Fracking Ban Act and added 24 co-sponsors in the House and the Senate. While we knew that these bills were probably not going to become law right away, we weren't going to allow the Trump administration to slow us down from pushing for what we really need to address the climate crisis. It's important to get these policies introduced and push our representatives in Congress to take on these urgent issues. All the while, we can connect with key congressional offices, build relationships and partnerships with allied organizations and coalitions working on the same goals, and highlight the need for a national fracking ban in the media. We were also able to elevate this issue in the 2020 election and lay the groundwork for organizing under the Biden administration, who, as Wenonah mentioned, have not been as strong on fighting climate change as they should be right now to effectively address the scale of the crisis that we face. But now under the Biden administration, who is more inclined to take action to address climate change, this is our key moment to push for bold demands and build on the work that we've all done together in recent years. In addition to building support in Congress, we're also organizing with the Build Back Fossil Free campaign. And this campaign calls on Biden to use his executive authority to avert further climate devastation while helping people recover from the pandemic. We're demanding that President Biden stop approving fossil fuel projects and protect the Black, Indigenous, Brown, Asian American, and Pacific Islander and working class communities that are disproportionately harmed by every step of the fossil fuel development process. And we're also demanding that President Biden declare a national climate emergency and repair the harm caused by environmental racism by delivering jobs, justice, and clean energy for all. And you all can learn more about this campaign at buildbackfossilfree.org, and we'll also put a link to this campaign in the chat. And the last thing I'll speak on today is going to be a recent tactic to collect signatures from local elected officials all across the country in support of these demands and deliver them to President Biden, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. For the first 100 days of the Biden presidency, organizers, interns, and volunteers at Food and Water Watch have been conducting outreach to elected officials to collect these signatures. And earlier this week, we sent our letter to our targets with nearly 400 signatures from elected officials across the country. So thank you all so much for listening. And next, I'm going to pass it over to our incredible coordinator, Kara McCauley. And Kara has been doing really incredible work on the effort to collect these signatures. And she's going to share with you all the demands that were included in the letter and more about her experience reaching out and speaking with elected officials.
Thanks, Jenya. Hi, everyone. My name's Kara, and I've been working with Food and Water for a little over a year now, first as an intern and then as a local coordinator. I've worked on a bunch of different campaigns in the Midwest, working to restore people's water service and pushing for a utility shut-off moratorium in Illinois, the Water for All campaign in Chicago to ensure that water service is affordable and accessible for all, and also the national ban fracking campaign, which is probably where I've had the most communication with elected officials. We've been asking them to sign on to our letter to the Biden administration, as Jenya mentioned, to urge them to end fossil fuel development and ensure a just transition for impacted communities. The letter specifically asks the Biden administration and Congress to carry out the following demands: to stop new permits for fracking on federal lands, as well as permits for fracking or fracking infrastructure to extract, refine, transport, or burn natural gas or oil, end federal subsidies for the fracking industry and other fossil fuel companies, revoke permits for current oil and gas wells within 2,500 feet of homes, schools, or hospitals, work with Indigenous peoples, workers, unions, and frontline community organizations to immediately invest in a just transition and economic transition plan for communities and workers impacted by the fracking industry, and finally, to ban fracking nationwide no later than 2025. We've been reaching out to as many elected officials as possible, everyone from school board members to the mayors of major cities and state senators. I started reaching out to officials in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area, and over a couple of months, my list kept growing, and I kept finding new people to reach out to. And I found that most of them were either really supportive and already invested in the issue, or they were really eager to learn more, and I was able to direct them towards different resources. I eventually moved on to outreach in DC, and the reaction was pretty similar. The thing I noticed in DC was that because the officials I was reaching out to were hyper local, I was having a lot more conversations that dealt with the role of fracking within their communities. I had an official ask me to give feedback on their county's climate plan. I was invited to speak about fracking at a local council meeting. I even had a staffer offer to help me run for office in Minnesota. So the responses really run the gamut, but the vast majority have been so positive and kind. I also just want to emphasize that I'm by no means an expert on climate policy or fracking. So much of what I've learned has really come from being asked questions and figuring out how to orient the campaign within these communities. If the officials you're talking to are asking questions, it means that they also don't know the answer. And so it's really okay if you as a volunteer don't have that information right away. And staff at Food and Water Watch are here to support you if you get any questions that are difficult to answer. It's the job of our elected officials to represent our interests, and right now we need them to tackle the roots of climate change because we're all so impacted by it. Thanks.
Cool, thank you, Kara. Now we're going to share a short video on this project that Food and Water Watch released yesterday.
We can, in the city of Denver, ban fracking or ban all oil and gas production, but if we don't do this at a larger scale, hopefully globally, then as we continue to munch up dinosaurs and spew them in the air, we will continue to hurt our habitability on the planet.
We are facing some pipeline build out here, the Penny's pipeline and the Adelphia Gateway pipeline. These two threaten to use eminent domain on residential and farmland. This is problematic for many of our citizens, and it all really stems back to fracking.
Stopping the rollout of fracking infrastructure is important for two reasons. One, to really protect the health and safety of our residents. We know that living close to or within 2,500 feet of oil or gas operations, puts you in line for really deteriorating health effects. From a broader perspective, our residents really care about taking substantive action to address the climate crisis.
The fact that this line 3 will have the equivalent climate impact of bringing 50 new coal plants online is just, you know, it just boggles my mind why anybody would support this. I'm very hopeful that President Biden will perhaps cancel this and send Enbridge packing home.
So I am asking the federal government, the Biden administration, our political leaders at the state level, at the national level, to lead, to do their jobs and to lead us forward toward a caring economy that will be sustainable and address the global climate crisis.
Yeah, I love that video. It's so powerful, and just to step back and like think about how like fracking like really impacts people's, you know, immediate lives is so important. And by the way, I'm Nisha. I live on Canarsie Indigenous land in Brooklyn, New York, and I work with the national organizing team. I also cover the New England states. So thinking about that video, thinking about what Emily, Wenonah, everyone said earlier on, it's all about talking about building power. So as many of you know, I'm just gonna spend like a quick second about building political power. So as many of you know, building political power in strategic districts and states is key in any campaign, especially for our goal of passing a national ban on fracking. So we pick key districts and states to organize in because of the role that the elected officials in those states play in actually passing the policies we want to see enacted. So when we think about this, we want to talk about building political power. When we say that, what we mean is that to influence the positions and decisions of elected officials, we need not only the elected officials that we saw in that video, but more and more elected officials to agree to our policies, because we want to affect immediate change in people's lives and the environment. So we need to involve more and more people in our campaigns through a combination of organizing and mobilizing in really strategic ways. So for example, we passed the country's most comprehensive fracking waste ban in Connecticut by going town to town, talking with residents, and passing local resolutions, which ultimately led to passing the statewide bill. We did this by working with multiracial, multi-regional, multi-faith-based organizations with a ton of volunteers and participation from local of elected officials. So there's our beautiful map. I love that map so much. And this is how we envision passing a national ban on fracking as well. So we're going to go town by town, state by state, one local organization or elected official to the next to get folks to understand the importance and urgency to ban fracking everywhere, and holding our elected officials accountable at the same time, which is very important, very necessary. So here at Food and Water Watch, we want our volunteers to engage in the most strategic organizing actions that will build political power. You'll hear next from Muskan, one of our amazing volunteers based in Massachusetts, who started in January and who's just like hit the ground running. Muskan is an undergraduate student at Boston University studying international relations and earth and environmental science. Muskan just came to us and was just like, I want to get involved. And we were like, yes. So in Massachusetts, we've been pushing Senator Ed Markey to take a stronger position against fracking. Senator Markey thinks of himself as a national leader on energy, climate change, and the environment. In the House of Representatives, Markey was the top Democrat on the Natural Resources Committee and senior member of the Energy and Commerce Committee. So he is a powerful climate leader in a lot of ways. but has yet to come out in support of a national ban on fracking. So we are targeting him in Massachusetts, and we are so lucky to have Muskan working in Massachusetts with us and joining us here tonight. So Muskan, tell us more about your experience with volunteering and targeting Markey.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to speak to you all today. My name is Muskan, as Nisha mentioned, and I use she, her pronouns. I started volunteering with Food and Water Watch in January, and my work has primarily been within the Northeast region. This has been my first time volunteering for this type of work, and I'm so excited to talk to you guys a little bit more about it. So since Senator Markey is a primary target on this important campaign, I hit the ground running and started to build support in Massachusetts. And I did this by sending out emails to in-state officials and sending out follow-up emails to convey the importance of their voice in sending a message to Senator Markey, as well as President Biden. I've reached out to officials all over the state, and a lot of the elected officials I've reached out to in Massachusetts were actually very supportive of the letter and readily signed on. We recruited nearly 28 elected officials from Massachusetts to sign the letter to encourage Senator Markey and President Biden to support a national ban on fracking. It really opened my eyes to how effective a quick and simple email or a phone call could be in getting elected officials to support this bill. And in addition to getting elected official support, we've also been gaining support from the constituents of Massachusetts to show elected officials that we also believe that fracking needs to be banned. On March 31st, myself and a small group, to be COVID safe, went to Senator Markey's office and delivered over 1,000 petition signatures from constituents, along with a letter about the harm of fracking. We wanted to show how many people are willing to fight this fight with us and why Senator Markey needs to step up now. And even now, we are gaining more elected officials and constituent support for a national ban on fracking that'll not only affect Massachusetts residents, but also people throughout the state. This has been my first time volunteering, and it has been so refreshing to see how my effort has had tangible results. I feel that I'm actually able to garner support for such an important topic because many of the elected officials responded back to my email saying how important the work was going and encouraged me. I would really urge everyone here to do the same if you can. Reach out to your elected officials, reach out to your peers, sign on the constituent petition, and also try to get elected official support. You really never know who's willing to help you out, and the email takes such a short amount of time to send out that it's so worth it. I really don't want to underemphasize the power of community organizing, because engaging your friends, your peers, your classmates, and your colleagues to push for this very, very, very important work will have very good results for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenya, Nisha, Kara, Muskan, for everything you're doing to build this campaign up from the ground. I think this is an excellent reminder that small actions day by day precipitate into big wins. And that's why I can't encourage everyone on this call strongly enough to help us deliver the letters to your congressional representatives in the coming weeks. They need to hear from you, and you might be surprised where some of them actually stand on the issue. For those of you who might be new, the first step is generally always the hardest when you decide to volunteer. And you actually already took it by hopping on to this call. So everything from here is just easier and easier and escalated and fun. So delivering letters to elected offices is fun. It's easy. It's an opportunity to be creative and showcase your talents, you know, if in case you wanted to throw in some song and dance or costumes or whatever. So click the volunteer link now if you haven't. Sign up with us. We'll help you look up your reps. We'll send you the letter to make things easy, and we'll follow up with you if you need help. And once again, I am asking you for your support. We are taking on the most powerful industry on the planet. It is a cancer that spreads its veins across our landscape, into our waters and our air, into our communities. And we need to stop the fossil fuel industry and transition to clean energy as quickly as possible. Food and Water Action doesn't take money from corporate donors. We don't take government money. And so in order to do that, to do this work, we rely on a lot of small monthly donations to not only support our work, but to help us do more of it. So monthly donations help us cover the costs of the tools we use to empower people to call their reps. It helps us cover some of the staff time spent on campaigns, and more of it means we can scale up and do more work. And we're really fortunate that we have a few deeply committed donors who want to match your monthly donation dollar for dollar. But we can only take advantage of that opportunity if you sign up, even if it's just $5 a month. Every contribution really counts. So thank you all so much for your dedication and support. If you've joined by phone and missed the links in the chat, don't worry, we will be following up with an email to everyone who RSVP'd that will include links and the recording. And now we're going to answer your questions. We've received some great questions already, but if you have a question for Emily or myself or the team about anything we've covered, use the Q&A box, that's question and answer, at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and we'll get through as many of them as we can right now.
So Walker, I see a question in here that if we expand clean energy strongly and widely, isn't that a way to shut down dirty energy through the back door? And I can take that one. I think one thing that's really important to understand is that the gas and the natural gas liquids that are being extracted through drilling and fracking and transported through all these pipelines are not only used for energy. And in fact, the natural gas liquids are heavily used by the plastics industry, the petrochemical industry, which is being used then to generate a lot of these single-use plastics that we know have become a major problem in polluting our waterways, the ocean. I just saw a new study about microplastics, which are now widespread in tap water on our farmland. And so we won't be able to stop the fossil fuel industry just by changing our electricity to renewable energy, because they're going to continue to use these products for petrochemicals. They also will continue to export them to other places. And so if we really want to take on and address climate change, we need to stop the extraction of fossil fuels. We need to leave them in the ground, and that we need policies that make that happen. We can't just use false economic solutions to try to make that happen. We need to hold our elected officials to pass the policies we need to keep fossil fuels in the ground and to move on to renewable energy.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. I see a number of other questions here. There's a question, isn't the slick water issue an unspoken major danger of fracking? The water supply issue seems to be understated. I'm not 100% familiar with slick water. Emily, is this one you can take?
Well, that's where, that's what they talk about with all of the various chemicals, many of which were not required to be disclosed by the industry. And so they claimed that they were trade secrets, kind of like the recipe for Coca-Cola. But what we know is that the industry didn't want to disclose the chemicals that they add to the fracking water that they inject to make it slick enough that it goes for these miles underground that it's required under high pressure to break apart the rock and release the gas and oil. And so, the fact that these chemicals, that many of which we don't even know, but the ones that we do know, we know many are carcinogenic or have other serious health effects, are forever contaminating the water supply. And a lot of what's being injected remains underground. Some of it comes back to the surface and then needs to be treated. And there's really no safe way to treat the wastewater. But the other problem is that a lot of this water, especially in, places in the West where, water scarcity is an issue, we're injecting this water underground and it's forever lost to the hydrologic cycle. And so I think both the water use and the water contamination, the fact that the industry hasn't even had to disclose the chemicals that they're using, are all some of them serious issues. And, I know some of the people on the call tonight are people whose drinking water has been contaminated by this industry forever and destroyed. And so, yes, those are some of the major issues with fracking.
Thanks, Emily. I have a question from Nancy. What can we say to people who say we will not have enough gasoline in California if we do not frack? It's It's an interesting question. People always want to talk about this doomsday scenario where we make a sudden decision to shift to a different energy economy, and then all of a sudden our technology fails. And the obvious question is, why would we do that? We're not talking about just shutting things off immediately and crashing the global economy. We recognize that fossil fuels play out in the market economy and often dominate the way we do things. And so what we're really talking about is a deep transition led by industry leaders, led by labor, led by experts in the environmental community, as well as frontline communities who are being poisoned by these technologies right now, talking about how we begin to do that transition through very intentional government policies and federal policies. And the question in California is an interesting one, right? Because we have much more stringent fuel standards than in any other state. We make a different blend, and that blend is a little bit more expensive to source, and not a lot of people make it. So we have to make it in-state, and we do, I believe, have some out-of-state sources for it. But the state is already pushing policies to begin transitioning our infrastructure within the next 10 to 15 years. And so our demand for gasoline is just going to continue to drop as we begin to make politically possible these technologies that are phasing us off of the fossil fuel system. So it goes hand in hand. We attack the supply side while reducing the demand side. And it's not, it's just not like a gut punch hard stop. We're building a transition and recognizing with our campaigns that these technologies now are harming and hurting people, and are, wrecking the future capacity of our planet to bear life. So we're building up the political realities to move these things forward. The next question I have is, are there any other states that are on the cusp of eliminating installation of gas-fired ranges? And does Food and Water Watch work on any of these types of initiatives? I'll kick that up to the policy and organizing director, but I do have thoughts on it if no one else does.
Sure. Yeah. So I think there are many places now. I know, I know San Francisco, Berkeley. There are several. Most of these that I'm aware of have happened at the municipal level, but I know it's something that our team in New York is hearing more about, and there's a push to try to prohibit gas hookups. Many of these are in new developments, and then some of them are more aggressively trying to look at existing and residences as well. But we are seeing this is happening across the country. I know Ventura, where we have an organizer in California in Ventura County, we've been supporting measures like this. And I think this is something that is a really good action that can be taken at the local level, where we prohibit gas hookups, especially in new developments. And then I know there are a number of places that are trying to also tackle policies for existing buildings and providing incentives to get homeowners to convert from gas to electric to get rid of the issue of using gas in homes for cooking and even heating in some places. That's happening. So we are supportive of these efforts, and getting involved in places where we are involved in organizing on the ground. And again, I think it's a really good local action that people across the country can be looking and asking your elected officials to look at.
Cool. Thank you, Emily. I want to recognize we're 3 minutes from the hour, so we're going to do one last question. And then we'll say some closing thoughts, and we'll wish you all a good evening. The last question is, how can I support the campaign if I don't have much time? We have a number of ways to get involved. And there are so many things that you can do regardless of whether or not you have time to jump in and plug into the work. We have national texting and phone banking teams that make these calls, assist our organizers on the ground with distributed online tech support. And if you think, I'm not very tech savvy, I don't like using the computer so much, that is literally everyone who is on our team right now. They are folks that we spend a lot of time with, training and getting used to our tools and plugging in. And then obviously we are trying to cultivate a climate of organizing and creating opportunities for folks to jump in on this national work. This is a big project, and it's no joke. Taking on the fossil fuel industry and all the money that they've embedded in our politics is not going to be easy. And that's why we need your help to outreach to elected officials. They do need to hear from constituents. People need to be engaging their offices and their communities on these issues. And it really doesn't take a whole lot of time to schedule out a meeting and show up at an elected official's office, or even organize a Zoom call with representatives from that office. We're one nonprofit, but the folks on this call, y'all are literally the thousands of people across this country who have a say in what goes on and who have a stake in how it goes. So please, 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 if you haven't, hit that volunteer link, help us get these letters out to congressional offices. And if you want, you can join our online and our digital teams as well, but let's build this fight together because we got a lot of work to do. And again, this is a big project. And we're up against the most powerful industry on this planet. Its money corrodes our institutions, it pollutes the opinions of our policymakers, poisons the water we drink and the future we believe in. And to fight back against organized money, we have to organize our money. We have to support the organizations that don't pull their punches when it comes to fighting the fossil fuel industry. So we're asking you, please hit that donate link if you haven't already. The best time to do it is right now before we move on. And remember that all new monthly donations made on this call will be matched through the end of the year. That helps us plan our budgets. It helps us scale out our organizing, our research, and our legal operations. It helps us breathe light into the fight. So please become a sustaining monthly giver with us today. You will not regret it. And with that said, if we missed your questions, please follow up with us when we send materials. But that does conclude our webinar on this year's campaign to ban fracking everywhere. So thank you again for joining us. If you have any lingering questions or thoughts, again, please reach out to us. But have a good night. Stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.